In an earlier video, I'd explored the major differences between the 6 major historical tarot decks. This is essentially a very brief and to the point version of that. Tarot decks are usually associated with divination, but the tarot began its journey primarily as an elaborate North Italian card game about 600 years ago. From its onset, its cards, and especially its trump and fool cards, have always been chock-full of Renaissance imagery, best exemplified by 6 major historical decks, frequently ordered very differently to most modern divination decks. And this is what this is about. These decks are listed here. They represent 2 different strands, one whose most typical characteristic is that 3 cards depicting cardinal virtues form a coherent block, the typical Italian decks numbered 1 to 3, whereas the other strand disconnects the cardinal virtues. Briefly put, later on exported decks listed as A through C. The 3 Italian decks at the top keep the virtues Temperance, Justice and Fortitude together and position them on the lower end of the trump sequence, thus rendering this block parallel to the 3 heavenly lights, a star, the moon and the sun, towards the upper part of the deck. Both types of blocks are coloured green here, whereas the 3 decks, of which at least some subsequently moved abroad, scatter the 3 virtues across 10 allegories, such as death. Death indeed appears as the pivotal point of the entire sequence of trump cards, consistently numbered 13 everywhere but within a few outlier decks, coloured yellow here. The disposition of the divisible virtues, as well as of the always indivisible block of lights, displays remarkable symmetry throughout the 3 decks at the bottom, both categories coloured in an orange hue here to set them apart from the upper half of the spreadsheet. Upon closer inspection, it isn't merely the virtues that display some mobility and variance. Several other cards swap places or change numbering over time. Some cards are introduced, others replaced, especially in the left part, i.e. the lowest trumps depicting social ranks. I won't go into these intricacies here since I already covered these topics in more detail in an earlier video. One of the crucial motivations though seems to have been to keep aforementioned death at number 13 at almost any cost. This led to complex phenomena slightly obfuscating the previously emphasized symmetries. The only thing that remains at this point is to catch a brief glimpse of the actual decks, laid out in a manner that stresses the symmetrical arrangement of the 3 virtues and the 3 lights after the at least originally 10 social ranks and amongst the block of 10 allegories such as the Grim Reaper himself. Bolognese Tarot in the north appears as the most unadulterated deck, expressing most similarities with and least deviation from most other decks, especially regarding the order of the 10 allegories. Florentine Minchiate, Italians will blush, it's a dirty word, are the largest deck due to the omission of 1 trump and the introduction of 20 new ones. Sicilian Tarot deviates the most from most other decks in terms of iconography, sequence, and in terms of introducing cards only ever present in this very deck. Which brings us to the order preserved in early treatises from northern Italy, especially Ferrara, that may well be the very cradle of the tarot. Unfortunately, there are apparently no modern decks where the trumps might be ordered accordingly. A somewhat later in-betweener is the Pavian sequence that reappeared even later in Paris. And finally, the most iconic, famous and popular of all tarots, the Tarot de Marseille from southern France, that ultimately spawned the entire modern divinatory interest in the tarot, due to its rediscovery by Parisian occultists around the time of the French Revolution. And that's that for today. Cheers for listening in.